The alarm rang at 4:30 in the morning, and Maria opened her eyes before it even finished its first beep. She had trained herself to wake up this way. After 12 years of the same routine, her body just knew. She lay there for a moment in the darkness of her small apartment, listening to the soft breathing of her twin daughters sleeping in the next room. Then she got up, quiet as a shadow, and started her day. This was her life. This had been her life for longer than she wanted to remember. Maria was 41 years old. She had deep brown eyes that looked tired most of the time, and hands that were rough from years of scrubbing and cleaning. She was not a tall woman, and when she walked through the homes of wealthy families, she had learned to make herself even smaller. Invisible. That was the trick to being a good housekeeper. You clean everything, you fix everything, but nobody should notice you doing it. She worked 3 jobs. In the mornings, she cleaned offices in downtown Hartford. In the afternoons, she worked at the Wilson estate, a big house owned by an older couple who barely spoke to her. And 3 days a week, she worked at the Montgomery mansion, the biggest and most beautiful home she had ever seen. The Montgomery family was different from her other employers. Mr. Montgomery was a businessman, always traveling, rarely home. His wife, Mrs. Montgomery, came from old money. She was the kind of woman who had never washed her own dishes in her entire life. She was not cruel to Maria, but she was not kind either. Maria was simply part of the house to her, like the furniture or the curtains. They had 2 children, both grown now and living in other cities. The house felt empty most of the time. Too many rooms for just 2 people. Maria often wondered what it would feel like to live in a place like that. To have so much space that you forgot some of the rooms even existed. But there was one room Maria never forgot: the living room. In the center of that living room sat a piano. Not just any piano. A Steinway grand piano. Black and shining. Worth more money than Maria would make in 10 years. It sat by the tall windows where the afternoon light came in, and it looked like something from a dream. Maria dusted that piano every single week. She polished its surface until she could see her own reflection in it. She cleaned between the keys with a small brush, careful, gentle, like she was touching something holy, but she never played it. Not once. She knew her place. Housekeepers did not sit at pianos in mansions. Housekeepers did not touch things that did not belong to them. So she cleaned it, and she walked away, and she tried not to think about how her fingers ached to press those keys. What the Montgomery family did not know, what nobody in America knew, was that Maria had once been a pianist herself. Back in the Philippines, where she grew up, Maria had been a different person. She came from a poor family, yes, but her mother had recognized something special in her. When Maria was 6 years old, her mother took her to the local church and asked the priest if Maria could practice on their old piano. The priest said yes, and from that day on, Maria played. She had a gift. Everyone said so. Her fingers moved across the keys like they were born to do it. She learned quickly, hungrily, spending every free moment at that church piano. By the time she was 15, she had won local competitions. By 18, she was offered a scholarship to a music conservatory in Manila. Her mother cried with joy. This was it. This was Maria's way out of poverty. But life does not always go the way we plan. Her father got sick. Very sick. The kind of sick that costs money they did not have. Maria had to make a choice. She could go to Manila and follow her dream, or she could stay and help her family. She stayed. She gave up her scholarship. She worked whatever jobs she could find to help pay for medicine and doctors. Her father died anyway, 2 years later. After that, something broke inside Maria. She stopped playing piano. She could not even look at one without feeling that pain in her chest. That reminder of everything she had given up. When she got the chance to move to America, she took it. She left the Philippines, left her past, left the girl who used to make beautiful music. She became someone new. Someone who cleaned houses and kept her head down and never complained. She met a man in Connecticut. He was kind at first, charming, full of promises. They got married. She got pregnant with twins. And then, slowly, he changed. He became angry, distant, unreliable. When the twins were 3 years old, he left. Just walked out one day and never came back. No warning, no goodbye, no money for his children. Maria was alone. She raised those girls by herself. Twin daughters, Sophia and Elena. They were her everything. Her reason to wake up at 4:30 every morning. Her reason to keep going when her body was tired and her heart was heavy. She worked and worked and worked so they could have a better life, so they could go to good schools, so they could have chances she never had. The girls were 15 now. They were smart, beautiful, kind. They looked like their mother, with the same deep brown eyes, but they had something Maria had lost long ago. They had hope. They still believed the world could be good to them. Maria never told them about the piano. She never told them about the girl she used to be, the dreams she used to have. What was the point? That life was over. That Maria was gone. She was just a housekeeper now. That was all she would ever be. Every night, she came home late. Her daughters would have dinner ready for her. Simple meals they learned to cook from YouTube videos. They would sit together at their tiny kitchen table, and the girls would tell her about their day, school, friends, homework. Maria listened and smiled, even when she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. Sometimes, late at night, when the girls were asleep, Maria would sit alone in the dark. And in those quiet moments, she would think about music. She would hear melodies in her head, songs she used to play, notes that still lived somewhere deep inside her. Her fingers would move slightly, pressing invisible keys on the kitchen table. Then she would stop herself. She would shake her head, go to bed, and wake up the next morning to do it all again. She had made peace with her life. Or at least, she thought she had. She told herself that dreams were for young people, for people with money and time and freedom, not for women like her, not for housekeepers who dusted pianos they would never play. But life has a funny way of surprising us. Sometimes the things we bury deepest have a way of coming back to the surface. Sometimes the gifts we think we have lost are just waiting, quietly, for the right moment to return. Maria did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. And it would start with her daughters, and a secret they had been keeping for 2 long years. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in October. Maria remembered every detail of that day, even years later. The way the autumn light came through the tall windows, the smell of the lemon polish she always used, the sound of the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Mrs. Montgomery had left early for a charity luncheon. Mr. Montgomery was in New York for business, as usual. The house was completely empty except for Maria. She had finished most of her work already. The floors were mopped, the bathrooms were spotless, the kitchen was clean. All that was left was the living room. She walked in with her cleaning supplies and stopped. The piano sat there, waiting, bathed in golden afternoon light. It looked almost alive. Maria stood frozen in the doorway, staring at it like she had never seen it before. Something was different today. She did not know why. Maybe it was the silence of the empty house. Maybe it was the way the light touched the keys. Maybe it was because she had dreamed about music the night before. A dream so vivid she woke up with tears on her face. Her feet moved before her brain could stop them. She walked across the room slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. She set down her cleaning supplies. She pulled out the bench, and for the first time in over 20 years, Maria Santos sat down at a piano. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the keys, so white and perfect, and felt like a stranger. Who was she to touch something so beautiful? She was just a housekeeper. Her hands were meant for mops and rags, not for making music. But then she placed her fingers on the keys, and something inside her woke up. She pressed one note, then another. The sound filled the empty room, rich and deep and more beautiful than she remembered. She closed her eyes. Her fingers began to move on their own, finding their way back to a song she thought she had forgotten. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major. The first piece she ever performed in a competition. Back when she was just a girl with big dreams, the music poured out of her. It was not perfect. Her fingers stumbled in places, hesitated in others. 20 years of silence had made them clumsy. But it did not matter. The melody was still there, living inside her. Waiting all this time, Maria played and she cried. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. She cried for the girl she used to be. She cried for her father, for the scholarship she gave up, for all the years she spent pretending this part of her did not exist. She cried because the music was so beautiful, and because she had missed it so much, and because she had been so afraid to admit that. When the last note faded, she sat there in silence for a long time. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were still trembling. But something had shifted inside her. Something that had been locked away for decades had finally cracked open. She heard a car in the driveway. Mrs. Montgomery was home early. Maria jumped up from the bench like she had been burned. She grabbed her cleaning supplies, wiped her face, and hurried out of the room. By the time Mrs. Montgomery walked through the front door, Maria was in the kitchen, calm and invisible, exactly where she was supposed to be. She never told anyone what happened that afternoon. She buried it like she buried everything else. But at night, when she closed her eyes, she could still hear the music. What Maria did not know was that she was not the only one with a secret. Across town, at Jefferson High School, her daughters had discovered something that would change all of their lives. It started 2 years earlier, when Sophia and Elena were 13. The school had an old music room that nobody used anymore. The band program had been cut due to budget problems, and the room sat empty most of the time. But inside that room, pushed against the back wall and covered with dust, was an upright piano. The twins found it by accident. They were looking for a quiet place to eat lunch, away from the noise of the cafeteria. Elena pushed open the door to the old music room, and there it was. She walked over to it, curious, and lifted the cover. She pressed a key. The sound was out of tune but still clear. Sophia came up beside her and pressed another key. They looked at each other and smiled. Neither of them knew why they felt so drawn to that piano. They did not know about their mother's past. They did not know about the girl from the Philippines who used to make beautiful music, but something in their blood remembered. Something in their bones knew. They started coming to the music room every day during lunch. They taught themselves simple songs by watching videos on their phones. They were clumsy at first, hitting wrong notes, stumbling through basic melodies. But they did not give up. There was something about the piano that made them feel alive in a way they could not explain. One afternoon, a man walked into the music room. He was older, maybe 70, with white hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. His name was Mr. Bernard, and he had been a music teacher at the school for 35 years before he retired. He still came back sometimes to help with the choir. He stood in the doorway, watching the twins play. They did not notice him at first. They were too focused on the keys, trying to figure out a song they had heard on the radio. When they finally looked up and saw him, they froze. They thought they were in trouble. Students were not supposed to be in the music room, but Mr. Bernard did not look angry. He looked amazed. He walked over to them slowly. He asked them to play something. Anything. The twins were nervous, but they played a simple melody they had learned. Something basic and full of mistakes. Mr. Bernard listened carefully. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something the girls would never forget. He told them they had a gift. A real gift. The kind of natural talent that cannot be taught. Only developed. He said he had been teaching music for almost 4 decades, and he could count on one hand the number of students he had seen with this kind of potential. The twins did not know what to say. Nobody had ever told them anything like that before. Mr. Bernard made them an offer. He would teach them piano, for free, after school and during lunch breaks. He had nothing but time these days, and it would break his heart to see talent like theirs go to waste. There was only one condition. They had to be serious. They had to practice every single day. They had to commit. Sophia and Elena looked at each other. They did not even need to discuss it. They both nodded, yes, and so the lessons began. For 2 years, the twins learned everything Mr. Bernard could teach them. Classical music, jazz, blues, everything. They practiced until their fingers ached. They stayed after school for hours, playing the same pieces over and over until they got them right. Mr. Bernard pushed them hard, but he also encouraged them. He told them stories about famous musicians, about people who came from nothing and changed the world with their talent. The twins kept it all a secret from their mother. They were not sure why at first. Maybe they were afraid she would think it was a waste of time. Maybe they wanted to surprise her someday. Maybe they sensed, without knowing the details, that music was a painful subject for her. But deep down, they had a dream. They wanted to play for their mother one day. They wanted to give her something beautiful. Something to make up for all the years she had sacrificed for them. They just needed the right moment. They had no idea that moment was coming sooner than they thought. Every year in December, the Montgomery family hosted a charity gala at their mansion. It was the biggest event of the season. Politicians came, business leaders came, doctors, lawyers, old money families from all over Connecticut. The women wore gowns that cost more than most people's cars. The men wore suits tailored in Italy. Champagne flowed like water, and the food was prepared by chefs brought in from New York City. Maria had worked every single one of these galas for the past 8 years. She knew the routine by heart. For weeks before the event, she would clean the house from top to bottom. She would polish the silver until it sparkled. She would make sure every window was spotless, every floor was gleaming, every room was perfect. On the night of the gala itself, she worked in the kitchen. She helped the catering staff, washed dishes, cleaned up spills, stayed out of sight. She was invisible, just like always. The guests walked past her without seeing her. She was part of the background, like the wallpaper or the chandeliers. This year was supposed to be no different. But 3 days before the gala, everything changed. Maria was dusting the bookshelves in Mr. Montgomery's study when she heard voices from the hallway. Mrs. Montgomery was on the phone, and she sounded upset. Very upset. Maria tried not to listen. It was not her business. But the walls were thin, and Mrs. Montgomery was practically shouting. The pianist had canceled. Apparently, the man they hired every year, some famous musician who played at all the big society events, had gotten sick. Some kind of hand injury. He could not perform. And now, with only 3 days until the gala, Mrs. Montgomery had no entertainment for her guests. Maria heard her making call after call. Every pianist she contacted was either already booked or too expensive on such short notice. One agency laughed at her, saying it was impossible to find someone qualified in just 3 days. Mrs. Montgomery's voice grew more and more frantic. Maria kept dusting. She moved to the hallway, then to the living room. She could still hear Mrs. Montgomery in the other room, now talking to her husband on the phone. "This is a disaster," Mrs. Montgomery said. "Everyone expects live music. What are we supposed to do? Play a playlist from my phone? We will be the laughingstock of the entire county." Maria looked at the piano. That beautiful Steinway, sitting there in the afternoon light. And without thinking, without planning, she opened her mouth and spoke. "Excuse me, Mrs. Montgomery." The older woman appeared in the doorway, phone still pressed to her ear. She looked surprised that Maria was speaking to her. In 8 years, Maria had barely said more than, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, ma'am." "What is it?" Mrs. Montgomery asked, impatient. Maria's heart was pounding. She did not know why she was doing this. The words just came out. "My daughters play piano," she said. "They are very good. If you need someone for the gala, maybe they could help." There was a long silence. Mrs. Montgomery stared at Maria like she had just suggested something ridiculous. Then she let out a small laugh. Not a mean laugh exactly, but the kind of laugh people make when they think something is absurd. "Maria, this is a $500 a plate event," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a child. "We need professional musicians. Real performers. I am sure your daughters are very talented. But this is not a school recital." Maria felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. She nodded quickly and looked down at the floor. Of course. I am sorry. I should not have said anything. She turned to leave, wishing she could disappear into the walls. But then another voice spoke. Wait. It was Mr. Montgomery. He had come home early and was standing in the doorway of the living room. Maria had not even heard him come in. He was looking at her with an expression she could not read. Let them audition, he said. Mrs. Montgomery turned to her husband, shocked. Richard, you cannot be serious. Why not? He said calmly. We have no other options. The gala is in 3 days. What is the harm in hearing them play? If they are not good enough, we say thank you and move on. But if they are, he shrugged. We have nothing to lose. Mrs. Montgomery looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew her husband was right. They were out of options. She sighed heavily and looked at Maria. Fine. Bring them tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. They can play one song, and we will decide. Maria nodded, her heart racing. Thank you. Thank you so much. She finished her work that day in a daze. What had she done? She had never even heard her daughters play piano. She did not even know they could play, but something inside her had spoken up, some instinct she did not understand. That night, she came home and found her daughters in the kitchen, doing homework at the small table. They looked up when she walked in, surprised to see her home earlier than usual. Maria sat down across from them. Her hands were trembling. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to be honest with me. The twins exchanged a look. They could tell something was wrong. Do you know how to play piano? Maria asked. The silence that followed told her everything. Sophia and Elena looked at each other, then back at their mother. Their faces had gone pale. How did you find out? Elena whispered. Maria felt tears spring to her eyes. She was not angry. She was overwhelmed. All this time, her daughters had been hiding the same gift she had buried inside herself. It felt like fate. It felt like a miracle. It does not matter how I found out, Maria said. What matters is that I may have done something very foolish. Or very wonderful. I am not sure which. Ria's. That's not. I'm favorite P.S. I'm not sure which. She told them about the Montgomery Gala. About the pianist who canceled. About how she had opened her mouth and volunteered them without even knowing if they could play. The twins listened in stunned silence. You want us to audition? Sophia asked. For rich people? At a mansion? Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Maria said. I know it is crazy. I know I should have asked you first. If you do not want to do it, I will call and cancel. I will tell them I made a mistake. The twins looked at each other again. Something passed between them, some silent communication that only twins can share. Then Elena smiled. It was a small smile, nervous but excited. We will do it, she said. Sophia nodded. We have been waiting for the right moment to show you what we can do. Maybe this is it. Maria reached across the table and took both of her daughter's hands. She was crying now, and she did not try to hide it. I have to tell you something, she said. Something I should have told you a long time ago. And finally, after all those years of silence, Maria told her daughters about the girl she used to be. The girl from the Philippines who played piano. The scholarship she gave up. The dreams she buried. She told them everything. When she finished, the twins were crying too. Why did you never tell us? Sophia asked. Maria shook her head. I was ashamed. I thought that part of my life was over. I thought it did not matter anymore. Elena squeezed her mother's hand. It matters, Mama. It matters more than you know. They stayed up late that night, talking and crying and laughing. For the first time, there were no secrets between them. And somewhere, in the middle of all those tears, the three of them made a decision. Tomorrow, they would walk into that mansion together. Tomorrow, they would show everyone what the Santos family was made of. The next afternoon, Maria drove her daughters to the Montgomery mansion in her old Toyota. The car made a strange noise every time she turned left, and there was a crack in the windshield that had been there for 2 years. She had never felt more aware of how poor they were than in that moment, pulling up to the iron gates of that enormous estate. The twins sat in the back seat, quiet and nervous. They were wearing the nicest clothes they owned. Simple dresses they had bought at a thrift store last Easter. Clean and neat, but nothing fancy, nothing like the clothes the people in that house wore. Maria parked the car near the service entrance, the way she always did. Then, she stopped herself. Today was different. Today, her daughters were not here to clean. They were here to play. She drove around to the front entrance instead. A woman from the catering company gave them a strange look as they walked up the marble steps. Maria kept her head high. She rang the doorbell and waited. Mrs. Montgomery answered the door herself. She looked at Maria, then at the twins, and her expression was hard to read. Surprise, maybe, or doubt. She looked at their thrift store dresses and their nervous faces, and Maria could tell she was already regretting this decision. "Come in," Mrs. Montgomery said, her voice flat. She led them through the grand foyer, past the sweeping staircase, into the living room, where the Steinway piano waited. The same piano Maria had dusted 1,000 times, the same piano she had played alone that afternoon when no one was watching. Mr. Montgomery was already there, sitting in an armchair by the window. He smiled at the twins and nodded politely. At least he seemed willing to give them a chance. "Well," Mrs. Montgomery said, gesturing toward the piano, "let us hear what you can do." Sophia and Elena walked to the piano together. Their steps were slow, careful. Maria could see their hands shaking slightly. She wanted to run to them, to hug them, to tell them everything would be okay. But she stayed where she was, standing by the door like she always did. The twins sat down on the bench, side by side. They looked at the keys for a moment. Then they looked at each other. Something passed between them. Some silent agreement. Some shared courage. And then they began to play. The first notes filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was a piece Maria recognized immediately. Debussy. Clair de Lune. One of the most beautiful pieces ever written for piano. But the twins were not just playing it. They were playing it together, 4 hands moving across the keys in perfect harmony. Maria stopped breathing. She had not known. She had hoped. She had prayed. But she had not truly known what her daughters could do. And now, hearing them play, she felt something crack open inside her chest. They were magnificent. Their fingers danced across the keys like they had been born to do this. The music swelled and faded, rose and fell, gentle as a whisper one moment, and powerful as a wave the next. They played with their eyes closed, feeling each note, breathing together, moving together, like 2 halves of the same heart. Mrs. Montgomery's face changed as she listened. The doubt melted away. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes grew wet. Mr. Montgomery leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together, completely still. When the last note faded into silence, nobody spoke. The room was so quiet Maria could hear her own heartbeat. Then Mr. Montgomery stood up. He walked over to the twins and looked at them for a long moment. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked softly. "A teacher at our school," Elena said. "Mr. Bernard. He gave us free lessons." Mr. Montgomery shook his head slowly, like he could not believe what he had just heard. Then he turned to his wife. "I think we found our musicians," he said. Mrs. Montgomery nodded. She was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to pretend she had not been crying. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think we did." 3 days later, the night of the gala arrived. Maria helped her daughters get ready in their tiny apartment. They had no gowns, no fancy jewelry, no designer shoes, but Maria had stayed up the night before, sewing and adjusting 2 dresses she found at a second-hand shop. She added ribbons and small beads she had saved over the years. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy, but made with love. When the twins put on those dresses, they looked beautiful, simple and elegant and real. Maria drove them to the mansion as the sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment, sitting in that old Toyota with her daughters, Maria felt like the richest woman in the world. The gala was already in full swing when they arrived. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns walked up the front steps. Waiters in white jackets carried trays of champagne. Maria was not allowed in the main hall. She was still the housekeeper. After all, her place was in the kitchen, behind the scenes, out of sight. She hugged her daughters at the service entrance and told them she loved them. "Just play like you did at the audition," she whispered. "Play from your hearts. That is all you need to do." The twins nodded. They were scared, Maria could tell. But they were also ready. She watched them walk away, toward the grand ballroom. Toward a room full of strangers who had more money than Maria would ever see in her lifetime. Then she went to the kitchen and tried to keep busy. Inside the ballroom, 300 guests mingled and laughed and drank champagne. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers and candlelight. A senator was there. A famous surgeon. The owner of a professional sports team. These were people who had seen the best of everything, the best food, the best wine, the best entertainment money could buy. When Mrs. Montgomery took the microphone and announced the evening's musical performance, a few guests raised their eyebrows. No one recognized the names Sophia and Elena Santos. Someone whispered to their neighbor, "Who are they? Never heard of them." Another guest leaned over and murmured, "I heard they are the housekeeper's children." A few people laughed softly. Others looked skeptical. This was a $500 a plate event. What were two unknown teenagers doing on that stage? The twins walked to the piano. They could feel every eye in the room on them. They could hear the whispers, sense the doubt. These people did not believe in them. These people expected them to fail. Sophia and Elena sat down at the bench. The room grew quiet. Somewhere in the back, a woman coughed. A man checked his watch. The twins looked at each other one more time. They thought about their mother, somewhere in the kitchen, believing in them. They thought about Mr. Bernard, who had given them this gift. They thought about all the lunches spent in that dusty music room, all the hours of practice, all the dreams they had carried in secret. Then they placed their fingers on the keys, and they played. They started with Claire de Lune, the same piece from the audition. But tonight, in this room full of doubt, it sounded different. It sounded like a message, like a declaration, like two young girls telling the world they belonged here. The whispers stopped. The champagne glasses froze in midair. The senator forgot what he was saying. The surgeon stopped mid-sentence. Everyone listened. The music filled the ballroom like something alive. It wrapped around the guests, pulled at their hearts, made them remember things they had forgotten. First loves, lost parents, childhood dreams. The twins played and the room transformed. Halfway through, they shifted into something new. A medley they had created themselves. Classical pieces woven together with jazz and blues. Beethoven meeting modern rhythms. Tradition dancing with innovation. It was bold. It was unexpected. It was absolutely breathtaking. In the kitchen, Maria pressed her face against the small window in the door. She could not see much, but she could hear. And what she heard made her knees go weak. Her daughters. Her beautiful, talented, incredible daughters. When the final note rang out, there was a moment of complete silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. The longest seconds of Maria's life. Then the room exploded. 300 people rose to their feet. They clapped, they cheered, they wiped tears from their eyes. The senator was applauding. The surgeon was shaking his head in amazement. Mrs. Montgomery was openly weeping. In the kitchen, Maria sank to the floor and sobbed into her hands. Her daughters had done it. Against all odds, against every doubt, against everything the world had told them they could not be. They had left them all speechless. That night, after the gala ended and the guests went home, something happened that nobody expected. One of the guests, a young woman who worked in marketing, had recorded the twins' performance on her phone. She posted it online before she even left the parking lot. By morning, the video had 10,000 views. By the next evening, it had 500,000. By the end of the week, it had crossed 50 million. The story spread like wildfire. News stations picked it up. Websites wrote articles about it. The headline was everywhere. The housekeeper's daughters. The secret talent. The night that left a room full of millionaires in tears. Maria woke up that first morning to her phone ringing, then ringing again, then again. She did not recognize the numbers. She answered one call, confused and half asleep, and a woman on the other end said she was a producer from a morning television show. She wanted to interview the twins. Maria thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Television producers, radio hosts, journalists, people from music schools, people from record labels. Everyone wanted to talk to Sophia and Elena. Everyone wanted to know their story. The twins did a few interviews, shy at first, then more comfortable. They sat on morning show couches and told the world about Mr. Bernard, about the dusty piano in the old music room, about practicing during lunch breaks and after school. They talked about their mother, the woman who worked 3 jobs so they could have a chance at something better. And every time they mentioned Maria, she cried. She could not help it. For so many years, she had felt invisible. She had moved through life like a ghost, cleaning other people's homes, staying out of sight, never expecting anything for herself. And now the whole world was watching her daughters shine. The scholarship offers started coming in the second week. Juilliard sent a letter. So did Berkeley. So did conservatories in London and Vienna. Schools that Maria had only ever heard of in movies were now fighting to give her daughters a free education. Full scholarships. Room and board. Everything paid for. Maria sat at her kitchen table and read those letters over and over. Tears streaming down her face. Her daughters would never have to struggle the way she had. They would never have to give up their dreams. They would have every opportunity she had been denied. But the most important moment did not happen on television. It did not happen in front of cameras or crowds. It happened quietly, in their small apartment, on a cold Tuesday night about 3 weeks after the gala. The twins had bought something with the small amount of money they had saved from odd jobs over the years. It was not much. Just an old keyboard they found at a pawn shop. Nothing fancy. Some of the keys stuck a little, and the sound was thin compared to a real piano. But it was theirs. They set it up in the living room, in the corner by the window. And that Tuesday night, they asked their mother to sit down. Maria looked at them, confused. What is this about? We want you to play with us, Sophia said. Maria shook her head immediately. No, no. I have not played in so long. I am not good anymore. I would only ruin it. Mama, Elena said gently. You gave up everything for us. You gave up your music, your dreams, your whole life. We would not be here without you. Please, just play one song with us. Maria looked at her daughters. These 2 young women who had grown up so fast, who had become so talented, who had made her prouder than she ever thought possible. They were looking at her with so much love in their eyes. She could not say no. Slowly, she walked to the keyboard. She sat down on the small bench, and her daughters squeezed in beside her. 3 people on a bench meant for 2. It was cramped and awkward and perfect. I do not know what to play, Maria whispered. Anything, Sophia said. Just start. And we will follow. Maria placed her fingers on the keys. They were shaking. She had not played with anyone since she was a teenager in the Philippines. Back when her mother would sit beside her and hum along. She pressed a key. Then another. A simple melody began to form. Nothing complicated. Nothing fancy. Just a soft, gentle tune that came from somewhere deep inside her. And then her daughters joined in. Their fingers found the harmony, weaving around her melody, lifting it up, making it bigger and more beautiful. They did not need sheet music. They did not need to practice. They just felt it, all 3 of them, connected by something deeper than words. They played together for almost an hour that night. Sometimes they laughed when someone hit a wrong note. Sometimes they cried. Mostly, they just played. Lost in the music, lost in each other. When they finally stopped, Maria pulled her daughters into her arms and held them tight. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving this back to me. In the months that followed, life changed in ways Maria never could have imagined. Mr. Montgomery, true to the kindness he had always shown her, set up a scholarship fund in Maria's name. It would help children of immigrant workers pursue their dreams, just like Sophia and Elena had. He donated a large sum of his own money to start it, and others followed. Within a year, the fund had helped dozens of young people attend music schools, art programs, and universities. Maria eventually stopped working as a housekeeper. Not because she was ashamed of the work. She had never been ashamed. She knew that honest work was nothing to be embarrassed about. No matter what anyone said, she stopped because she finally had a choice. She got a job teaching piano at a community center downtown. It did not pay much, but it was enough. And every day, she got to share her gift with children who reminded her of herself. Kids from poor families, kids who had talent but no opportunities, kids who just needed someone to believe in them. She was happy. For the first time in 20 years, Maria Santos was truly happy. The twins accepted scholarships to one of the best music schools in the country. They moved away for college, which was hard for Maria. The apartment felt empty without them, but she knew they were exactly where they needed to be. They called her every week. Sometimes, they played songs for her over the phone. Sometimes, they just talked, and every few months, they came home to visit. And the three of them would squeeze onto that little bench and play together again. People often asked Maria what the secret was. How did her daughters become so talented? How did she raise them so well? How did she keep going through all those hard years? She never knew how to answer. There was no secret, really. Just love. Just sacrifice. Just the stubborn refusal to give up. Even when giving up would have been easier. Some people called it luck, others called it fate. But Maria knew the truth. It was not luck. It was not fate. It was 20 years of silent struggle. 20 years of invisible work. 20 years of believing that someday, somehow, things would get better, and they did. Not because the world handed her anything, not because someone rescued her, but because she never stopped trying, because she raised two daughters who carried her dreams forward, because sometimes, the things we think we have lost are just waiting for us to find them again. Maria Santos was never invisible again. And whenever she sat at a piano now, she played like that girl from the Philippines. The girl with big dreams. The girl who never really went away. She had just been waiting, all along, for the right moment to come back.